Hi, I'm Femi OK. The stakes were high this year for many across the globe, bringing people to the streets to protest. In this end-of-year stream special, we are going to be looking at the impact of the biggest social movements of 2016.
We have the democratic majority. We want Brexit.
As 2017 approaches, the war in Syria enters its sixth year. The stories of death, destruction and displacement continue to grow. Escalation on the ground has been met with growing global outcry on and offline. The battle for Aleppo has dominated world headlines, but the absence of journalists in the hardest hit areas has left a vacuum of information that can't actually be verified. People on Twitter and Facebook have stepped into that space, sharing unverified stories, images and video, some of which were later discredited. Take this image, for example. A journalist tweeted it out, saying it was taken in Aleppo, and it was shared hundreds of times. She later deleted the tweet after it was revealed the image was actually an award-winning photograph taken in the aftermath of the 2007 assassination of Pakistan's former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto in Rawalpindi. Now, many online were quick to caution against contributing to misinformation by circulating unverified reports, arguing that it clouds what's actually really happening. Syria has been ranked one of the deadliest conflicts to report from this year. The limited access that reporters get to cover all sides of the war has created an information crisis as well as an humanitarian one. To help us talk about this, we're joined by Claire Wardle. She's a researcher at First Draft News. That's an organisation dedicated to improving the standards of reporting in the digital age. She's coming to us from Malaga, Spain. Claire, could this unverified information, and lots of it, be one of the worst things that's ever happened to journalism?
So I'm glad that you're making a point of this issue, because actually everybody right now is talking about fake news and news articles, but actually there's a much bigger issue that we're seeing from Syria but elsewhere of manipulated imagery, or actually correct imagery, but it's simply being used out of context. So this is a problem that's facing journalists. We're seeing journalists put out incorrect information. We're seeing newsrooms put out incorrect information, and just people like ourselves, just citizens.
So there must be a new rule book then of journalism, and also as a news consumer. First of all, as we're watching the news, we're reading the news, how can we tell what should be our antennae, what should be our radar telling us?
So the first question is, you should be skeptical of everything. And the issue is often with imagery, we're not skeptical because we believe that a camera frames an image and it's objective. But actually, we should always be double checking. So if you see an image appear, you should be doing a reverse image search, check whether this has appeared anywhere elsewhere, Google the URL, think, really, do I know that this is true? What else can I find online that might help verify this? So it doesn't matter if you're a journalist or you're anybody, you can do these same checks. They're all free tools online.
Shouldn't our news sources be doing that for us?
So that's a great question. But with Syria in particular, of course, journalists really can't get access to the conflict zones. So actually, journalists at Al Jazeera or anywhere are in exactly the same position as any of us that can access Twitter or YouTube. So unfortunately, all of us have to do those same verification checks. And actually, if I retweet something, I suddenly become a publisher. So we all have responsibility to do the same checks now.
Claire, can you break down the difference between propaganda, activism, citizen journalism? Because all of that is coming out of Syria and some of it is being labelled as news.
So the big question is, what's the motivation of somebody when they create content? So it could be that somebody just captures something with their mobile phone and they are simply an accidental eyewitness. They have no motivation here. But you might also get people who describe themselves as citizen journalists and they're out there to tell a particular story. You might also get somebody from an advocacy organisation who has a particular story to tell. So even the direction in which they tilt their camera, they're framing the story. And then, of course, propaganda is, there are sides in Syria and elsewhere who have a very particular story to tell. And essentially, propaganda is, one side, biased, an information source that is trying to change people's attitudes and behaviours.
You mentioned fake news. It's something that's coming up a lot right now in different places around the world, in the US, in Europe, around election campaigns, around issues that are very critical. What is your definition of fake news?
So I talk about a misinformation ecosystem because there's lots of different elements to this. But the fake news that people are talking about right now, mostly that's sites that have been created deliberately to make money. The people have no intention of spreading any type of information. All they want to do is get clicks. They use emotional headlines, they use emotional imagery, and they don't care whether it's true or false. They simply want people to click because they want the revenue. And that's the problem we're seeing today, which is on your Facebook feed or Twitter feed, it looks the same, whether it's from Al Jazeera or it's from a website that was created by a 16-year-old teenager in Macedonia. That, for me, is fake news, but there's a lots of other types of information out there that we need to think about and be critical of, whether it's manipulated videos or old photos that are redoing the rounds. All of that is part of the misinformation ecosystem.
Facebook has recently set up a process by which you can at least know whether the story you're reading has there may be some doubt about the veracity of that story. What do you make of that? Do you think that might be where we're going in 2017?
So I think it's a really interesting move by Facebook, and I'm glad to see them try to take steps in this direction. But unfortunately, we live in our own echo chambers. And because we're humans, there's something called confirmation bias. And for that reason, we selectively expose ourselves to certain information. So my fear is that for certain people, they're already discrediting those fact-checking organizations. And if they see it says challenged by fact-checking organizations, they're already saying, I'm not going to believe that. So I worry slightly that we're just moving in these two, very polarized positions. And I'm not sure we've got this middle ground that we can debate around.
I've always been a news junkie, so I'm a big consumer of news as well as a journalist. And now there are so many stories that I don't believe that I have to go and check. But if you're just a regular person who just wants to open up the internet or open up whatever you're reading and just find out what's happening in the world, what's it going to be like in 2017?
I think we're going to see much more sophisticated flags. So I think the social networks are going to get smarter at differentiating organizations like Al Jazeera or trusted organizations that have ethics guidelines and have editorial policies, and will differentiate those sorts of organizations from those that were created 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
Because we're only human and we're scrolling through these streams very quickly. So I think that's what we'll see in 2017.
How should Syria be covered in 2017, Claire, bearing all of this in mind?
I think journalists and newsrooms have to be much more aware of the verification steps they're doing. And rather than falling back on the very lazy wording of this cannot be independently verified, I think newsrooms should be much more transparent with audiences around certain steps. So what's the provenance? Is this the original version of this footage, all the way through to what was the motivation of this person? And we need to be much more transparent with audiences about what we're showing, why we're showing it, and where we found it.
All right. Claire there, calling out every journalist who's ever used this cannot be independently verified. Claire, thank you very much indeed. Happy 2017. Take care. So, truth to power. The stream always gives a platform to our community to share their grievances. Have a look.
In a democratic society, we don't block internet, we don't block social media, we don't, decide on free expression.
In the last 26 years, thousands of people who've been killed, thousands of cases where even the police, the Jammu and Kashmir police has investigated the human rights abuses. Why is there not even a single prosecution? Why is not even a single armed forces personnel being prosecuted by the civilian courts? Why not even one?
What is keeping this government is the ridiculous amount of budget that you have allocated to your security system. I promise you, remove this budget, just stop arresting us and allow us to organize, and I give you a week, I give you 3 days, and this government will be overthrown by the people.
I've been through any number of protests and hearings on this, and most of the opponents come by cars, which
okay,
is
well, the only reason that we're in
just
cars is because your people invaded. We'd be fine and still on our horses. So you're over here saying, well, you drive a car. Well, the only reason we have to do any of this is because you invaded.
Strong words from Simon Moyer-Smith. He's the culture editor of the Indian Country Today. He was last on to discuss protests around the massive oil pipeline in the US state of North Dakota. Earlier this month, there was some good news. Simon, how did you cover that good news?
Hi there. Yeah, so we were looking at it more of a victory, right? A small victory, and what I was calling it like a Custer victory. So the Black Snake got a good wallop. The Army Corps of Engineers said that they weren't going to approve of a permit. And so there was a momentous celebration, but we have to be careful and recognize that the Dakota Access Pipeline is not dead. So it is still very much alive, but it did get a nice little stunner in the jaw.
So what's the status then of the pipeline? Is it still being worked on? Have the workers gone away? Is there hiatus? What's happening?
No, so we know that the pipeline is bullish. They want to continue. They want to build this pipeline. They want to continue as far as they can. Remember, they want to take it all the way to Illinois. They invested so much money in it. So right now, what they're trying to do is get the easement. They're fighting to get the easement. They said they will not reroute. And the Standing Rock Sioux says, well, we're not going to stand idly by. So people are still at the camp. There are at least 1,000 people that are still at the camp. So even though the temperatures have dropped, spirits are still high.
Simon,
it's hard to count.
That's extraordinary. I mean, people are still out there camping. I thought, there was a little bit of a pause in the protests. And then that just came as winter was descending. What is it like out there? I mean, we're looking at some pictures. It looks pretty severe.
It's severe, but we also have to remember that the indigenous peoples of this land have been living in those temperatures since time immemorial. That's like asking the Irish, oh, what's it like to live in Ireland when it's cold?
Yeah.
It's like we've been doing this for centuries, long before the United States was even an idea.
Yeah.
So I think people need to comprehend that the people that need the help are maybe those that aren't familiar with that location, aren't familiar with like living in the north. So they're the ones that need the help. To winterize their teepees or winterize their communities or their camps.
And they're still there because why?
Because it's our land, and because water is sacred, and because it's an invasion of our land. They've already desecrated sacred sites, and we're not going to sit idly by. The elders have already said that this isn't going to happen, but of course you have the Dakota Access Pipeline owners, Energy Transfer Partners, saying it's a done deal. They think it's a foregone conclusion, but it's not a foregone conclusion. This is treaty territory. This is ancestral land. And the Standing Rock Sioux, the Lakota, have a right to protect the land and the water so that there can be future generations and people don't have to wonder what happened to the water and why didn't anybody do anything about it, because we're doing something about it now.
Court cases coming up. Is that the next battle?
Well, right now what we're trying to focus on also is Red Fawn Fallis. Red Fawn Fallis has been in prison since October 27th. The charges against her were felony charges, an attempted murder of a police officer, but those were dropped by Morton County for lack of evidence. But now she faces federal charges for possession of a weapon. So we want people to recognize that she is a political prisoner. And there are more cases coming up. There are misdemeanor cases, there are felony cases coming up. So there's going to be a lot more battles happening in the courtroom, but also most people are unaware of Red Fawn still being in prison, and we need to recognize her. And she's still in there, I mean, long after October 27th.
Preparing for a new administration in the United States, what difference do you think that might make to the protests, the idea of native land staying with native people? What difference will that make, Simon?
I mean, it's a little frightening because we know Donald Trump's position on pipelines. We know that he was invested in the Dakota Access Pipeline specifically. The Standing Rock Sioux leadership aren't negotiating with him, and they're not going to negotiate with Energy Transfer Partners. If anything, they want to work with the new administration coming in, provide information to them, and hopefully sway them and get them to comprehend the danger to the water, the danger to the community. So it does seem a little disturbing when you have Trump coming in and he's pro-pipeline, pro-drilling, pro-gas. So we do have a fight ahead of us, just even trying to keep the water clean and to keep the oil in the ground.
Simon, thank you for being part of our end of year show. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
At the end of 2015, we highlighted a movement to shed light on violence against women in Latin America. A recent tragedy in Argentina has reignited these calls.
Ni una menos, vida no queremos, ni una menos.
quiero ser la próxima mujer en la bolsa y entonces todos tendríamos que estar acá, hombres, mujeres, niños, niñas, adolescentes.
To tell us about the movement of Ni Una Menos, Not One More, we're joined by Andalucia Knoll. She's an independent journalist and she comes to us from Mexico City. Andalucia, is this movement getting real power at the end of 2016, heading into 2017?
Yes, it is growing, and there are protests happening all the time across Latin America, but sadly it's also growing because these brutal acts of violence against women keep occurring. This Ni Una Menos first large march that happened all across the continent in countries all across Latin America happened in October, and it was in response to the brutal murder of a 16-year-old girl in Argentina, Lucia Perez. But over the past few months, there have been many other brutal assassinations. Just this month in Colombia, in Bogotá, a 7-year-old girl, Juliana Andrea Zamboni, was kidnapped right outside of her home, and she was found dead hours later. She had been sexually abused and tortured. This is just happening all the time. And here where I am in Mexico, at least 6 women are killed every day. And it is believed that many of these assassinations are considered femicides, which means that they are specifically gender-based crimes where the gender of the person had something to do with it. So there is this movement wherein the 25th of November of this year, there was also more mobilizations all across the continent. It is the International Day of Violence Against Women, and women said, okay, well, if this is a day where we're supposed to celebrate that we're fighting against violence against women, we're going to take to the streets. And just sadly, a few days after, there are more brutal assassinations. So I would like to say that it's a movement that's growing and actually succeeding in putting an end to this violence, but it is not. I would say that it could be perhaps likened to Black Lives Matter in the US, where since the Black Lives Matter movement has emerged, unfortunately, Black people keep being killed by the police, but at least it is being documented more. And in some of the cases, the officers are actually being tried and found guilty, very few, but that is happening. And also that it is allowing more people to know what is happening. So perhaps there is not right now more violence against women in Latin America, but with social networks and with the response from media outlets and reporting on this issue, more people know that it is a problem, and perhaps
so
this will
Andalucia,
help.
other than awareness, or is that critical? Is awareness the first step? But other than that, how do the numbers of women affected by violence in Latin America, how do they go down?
They go down combating impunity. I mean, they also go down, it's both on a political and legal level and on a social, societal level. So I'll speak first about impunity. Here in Mexico, the majority of crimes against women are never investigated, and often women say when they go to their local police station or go before a court that they feel that they are never believed. Just recently there was a senator who's actually a famous Mexican athlete here, Ana Guevara, and she was riding her motorcycle and she was attacked and beaten, and she denounced it in publicly and in front of the Senate, and then there was a huge backlash on social media saying that she made it up. Then certain hashtags came out saying that a happy woman is a beaten woman, and so it's really important that women can go before legal officers and be able to speak about what happened to them and be believed.
So much more to talk about. We will do that in the new year. Andalucia, thank you for being part of our end of year show. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. So from challenges on the streets to personal struggles, earlier this year we did a stream program about pregnancy past 40. One doctor volunteered to share her personal journey. Have you decided this is the line and then I'm done?
That is such a great question. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago, well, let me just put it to you this way. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I had told myself if I never had kids, I'd be fine. Yeah. A few years ago, when I met my husband, I said, if we don't get pregnant naturally, I'm never doing IVF. But we changed. My feelings changed. My heart changed. Having the love of my life and wanting to have a child with him changed everything about me. So 5 cycles of IVF between ages 40 and 41 and a half has taken a physical and an emotional toll, but it did teach me one thing. I want to be a mom.
OBGYN Dr. Shannon Clark is coming to us from the US state of Texas. She's had new additions to her family. See how big my smile is right now. Who do we have there? Is this their TV debut, their international TV debut?
Well, this is one of them. This is Remy Vaughn, the boy, and there's a girl over there sleeping, Sydney Renee.
All right, congratulations. Now, your acting skills were phenomenal because when we talked to you in the Pregnancy Past 40 program, you said, I'm taking a break. We're taking a break at the moment. Well, you were taking a break because you were already pregnant.
Well,
and you didn't tell us. Yes.
I was early, so we weren't ready to announce yet. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations. I think the takeaway from this story is talking about egg donation and what that actually means, because that's how you ended up with two beautiful babies, Remy and Sydney. And people don't often like to talk about it, Dr. Shannon.
So, you know, as you recall, I had been through 5 cycles myself and was unable to produce viable eggs because of my age. So around actually January 1st of 2016, my husband and I took a trip to Peru. We were hiking Machu Picchu to kind of take a break. We came home, regrouped, and decided that we wanted to pursue pregnancy through an egg donor. We did the search. We found a young lady who was willing to donate her eggs, and we went through, and I ended up with 2 beautiful babies. So yes, people don't like to talk about it. It's no different than having a sperm donor, for lack of, you know, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But from a female perspective, sometimes it's a little hard to stomach and hard to accept. But my goal is to make it less taboo.
Right.
And it's okay. You know, I got my 2 beautiful babies, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for a young lady who donated her eggs to me.
Sure. What advice would you give someone who's watching? And the holiday time is a tough time because it's all about kids. And if you're trying for a baby and you haven't got there yet, what would be the piece of information and advice you'd give people?
Holidays are very rough. You need to have a strong support system. You know, yes, miracles do happen, but they don't always happen when we want them and how we want them. And it didn't for me. But I was persistent, and I want to make a statement that you know, going through IVF is very time-consuming and costly. I was very fortunate that I was able to afford IVF and the number of times that I tried and egg donor. Not everyone is able to do that. So my biggest takeaway message would be to say that, you know, if you're planning a pregnancy after age 35, please take care of yourself, be educated, discuss it with your OBGYN, assess your fertility, and don't wait too long to seek help
Dr.
if
Shannon
you're trying
Clark,
to get pregnant and you can't.
That's wonderful advice. We really appreciate it. Congratulations to you and Remy, Sydney, and your entire family. Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now, we wouldn't be the stream without our online community. That is you. So we are going to close this episode with your thoughts about 2016.
Worst year ever? Nah. It's been an unnerving year. Not the worst year, but being unnerved is pretty bad.
2016 can be described in 2 words: upheaval and uncertainty.
We have work to do. We have a lot of work to do.
Happy New Year.
And from all of the Stream family, Happy New Year to you too. We hope that we will hear from you in 2017. Don't forget to tweet us what you think we should be looking out for in the coming year using the hashtag AJStream. Until then, as always, see you online. Take care.